Hello, everyone, and welcome to Industry Insider. My name is Carrie Wise, and I'm joined with my host, Matt Jones.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time to carve out of your day today. This is Industry Insider. I think this is our 5th episode, right, Carrie?
Yeah, 5th episode. We've had some really great guests, and while we wait for everyone to join and, of course, share this with your group, let's talk about some of the guests we had on. So we started with, it was Jeremy Allen.
The one and only Jeremy Allen, the GM of Gary Yalman's Ford out there in Florida. And we selected his dealership and him particularly because in this environment, they were able to create a sales process where their sales dipped like only 5%, even though they were only working like every other day. Like fantastic, right?
Pretty amazing. And then we had Ollie Rita.
Number one salesman in the Earl.
Yeah, the Ollie Rita, we should say. And just amazing. I'm so inspired by Ollie because I just love superstars that are incredibly humble, right? Yeah. I mean, it's not a combination you always see, and that's what you see in Ollie. Okay, and then we had one of my good friends, Stephen Mason.
The power of positivity. Stephen Mason, Mr. Positivity himself. And guys, if you didn't see it live, go back just so you can hear a general manager say, what if I told you COVID-19 actually made selling cars easier for me? I'm not going to tell you how he justified that, but if you want to hear it and his justification is fantastic, watch the replay.
And what about the mule, right?
Yes.
If you're a leader, you need to be a mule. Right? Yes. I love that. And then there was Doug Wells.
Doug Wells, Mr. Mercedes man himself, Mr. Doug Wells. And Doug is so fantastic. He's been in the car business for 30 years. He's always been successful. His claim to fame is he's known for creating a custom experience for his consumers. And part of that includes a sales process where the salesperson is from the beginning all the way to the end. His stores actually don't employ finance people. And he's talked about some of the benefits of having a system like that in today's market, especially in the COVID market. It's just all around. This has just been really, really good so far.
Yeah, Doug was the epitome of the dealer, right? He's doing this interview. We're hearing phones. We're seeing people walk behind him. He's working deals while he's interviewing us. I loved it, right? Nothing shuts down, even on Industry Insider.
It was fantastic. And the point of Industry Insider, if you didn't know, is we've created this because Carrie's been in the car business for 20 years. I've been in the car business for 20 years. TrueCar and us, we love automotive, but we're not selling cars right now. And we wanted to create a very creative way and a very inclusive way to give information to the dealer body. And we wanted to create best practices. So in this time, there's a lot of best practices out there, but it's generally third parties talking to third parties, like, one vendor talking to another vendor. We thought, why not create a platform for dealers to hear best practices from dealers who are performing at a very high level? So this is Industry Insider, dealer to dealer communication, and that is the gist of this show. This particular episode is a little bit different, though. This episode, you're going to have to deal with Carrie and myself all alone. We have no dealer on this show, but the reason why is because we're covering some very important data related to COVID, and Carrie will explain a little bit more about this data.
Yeah, well, and speaking of COVID, most of our shows have been focused on COVID just because we launched the show in the middle of this pandemic and we felt like it was relevant. And we're certainly going to be moving on to other topics that are also relative later on as we do additional shows. But I do want to throw out, obviously, we work for TrueCar. The show is hosted by TrueCar. We have created a lot of different offerings to help dealers in this COVID pandemic, right? We're in the remote retailing era right now. And so we're really excited that this week we launched payments on TrueCar. So in addition to a consumer getting a upfront price from a dealer, they can now get a payment and also a trade value. So if you're not opted into that as a TrueCar dealer, make sure you reach out to your rep or go to truecar.com/dealer to get more information. And I also just want to throw out that last week we launched TrueCar Military. We're really, really excited about it. As a consumer, you can go to truecar.com/military. As a dealer, you can learn about it at truecar.com/dealer/military. And, this is our exclusive auto buying program for military service members, veterans, and their families. And we're really excited to serve those who have served our country. So that's my commercial for you from a TrueCar standpoint. Please share this. And we are going to have such an exciting show, right? Talking about about COVID, as Matt Jones mentioned, the impact of this pandemic on the car shopping experience. And what better way to see that impact than to look at the actual TrueCar shopping behavior on our site before COVID and after COVID first kind of launched and social distancing and quarantines came about. So that's what we're going to dive into. But what's also great is that we're going to look at consumer research. At TrueCar, we have an amazing marketing research team. We probably survey tens of thousands of consumers. And so it's important to get a pulse on how they're feeling, what their sentiment is. And we're going to jump into that. But Matt, let's just kind of go through some caveats on kind of the data that we're going to be looking at. And let me just throw both of us actually here on the screen. I can see you, Matt, now.
Yes, I'm there. So we're going to use the terms pre-COVID and post-COVID. And so for people who are tuned in, let me explain to you what that means. Pre-COVID is the world prior to us really knowing, before COVID really jumped on the scene and really affected the way that business was happening in North America. So the data when we refer to pre-COVID is talking about March 1st through March 12th. That's the barometer. We're calling that like regular life. Post-COVID means not after COVID's done, we're still in COVID, but post-COVID means after we understood the impact of COVID, like right now. So from March 13th through May 5th. So pre is early March and post, we're talking about after that until like May 5th. That's where this data is drawn from. And also one other thing we want to make sure that we call out, when we're talking about shopper behavior, we're not talking about shoppers that are browsers. We're talking about intenders, people who intend to purchase a vehicle within the next 12 months. And this information is gleaned from people who've gone through the whole process as far as submitting a lead to a dealer. So not just somebody who came onto the site to look at inventory. These are people who've said they are going to buy cars and have gone far enough to actually reach out to a dealer. That's where the basis for a lot of this data point comes from.
Yeah, so just to be clear, we have our TrueCar website behavior that's looking at our actual prospects, right? People who have submitted a lead to a dealer. And then we have our research, which are intenders, people who plan on shopping in the next 12 months. So we're going to jump into the data. And by all means, if you have questions, please pop them into the Facebook Live. By the way, I want to give a shout out to Brad Smith. He said hello, Matt, to us. And thank you, Brad, for being on and supporting. So I'm going to jump right into it, and you can see my screen, hopefully. But you can actually find this infographic I should have mentioned before we jump in at TrueCar.com. In fact, I'm going to put the banner up on here, TrueCar.com/dealer blog. And that is where you can access our TrueCar dealer blog. I'm going to put it up here and hopefully don't mess anything up here. Wrong one here. Let's see. TrueCar.com/dealer blog. Hopefully that is showing there. And that's where you can go to the COVID section of the blog and you'll see this infographic and other resources as well.
And this infographic was just released this morning. So
yes,
don't feel like you're behind. This is really the world's second taste of it. It's like this was just a few hours ago. This was completely under wraps. And Barbara,
yes, here. We're very excited. And I thought, Matt, that we have to start with the good news, right?
Yes.
So remember, pre-COVID, we're looking at that March 1st to 12th period. And this is prospects on TrueCar. And we're comparing the daily prospects to what was the daily average pre-COVID. Right. And so as you can see on March 1st, we were a lot closer, obviously, to that average. We took a dip in March 15th, 21% below that pre-COVID average. Right. And then April 1st, we were really concerned at negative 37% below the pre-average. But April 15th, May 1st, we are now returning to a pre-COVID level. And Matt, why don't you jump in? I mean, what are we seeing even after May 1st?
Which, like, remember this ended May 1st, but we're seeing numbers that are actually increasing. We're seeing numbers as we get into the Memorial Day weekend that are approaching levels that you would normally see towards like December, which is actually one of the highest traffic months of TrueCar intenders. So what this chart is saying is, yes, we dipped and we rose, but as of like right now, we're actually seeing increases to where we were in early March. And this is just outstanding news. This is fantastic news. The intenders are out there.
Very exciting. And we're looking at prospects here. So of course, we eventually need to look at how this impacts sales. I mean, we're seeing a similar trend when you look at our sales matching. And, I think there's going to be some pent up demand, right? That people are obviously shopping, but they're coming back and they're feeling a lot more comfortable to restart that vehicle shopping process.
Yes. Now, with this next slide, so when you take a look at this, obviously this is a map of the country, and we're trying to show you where the greatest and most modest declines in shopper intention actually live. Now, if you take a look at this map, you'll see the areas that have the highest congestion. Like if you look at your New Yorks and your New Jerseys and you look at your Californias, they saw the greatest decline in intenders. Some parts of the country had a moderate, and some actually, Montana, believe it or not, actually saw a 2% increase in intention in this time frame. But on the whole, there was an average, the average decline was 26% when you combine new and used intenders in this time frame. But we are back on the incline. So just if you want to take a look at this map a little bit to see where your state was or where your region was, and these regions are actually going to play into some of the other conversations that we're going to have later on in this show.
Yeah, so it varies by state. So let's talk about new versus used. And what we saw on our site is that the demand for new vehicles in terms of prospecting increased. Went from 42% pre-COVID that were shopping a new vehicle, and that increased to slightly by 46%. I think this one's always surprising because 46% of our prospects are shopping new. The majority are still shopping used. And most people don't think of TrueCar as necessarily a used car site, but you can see it's pretty even on new car and used car.
Yeah, and it's awesome because when you look at this, you see how many people are shopping used cars, but a lot of the conversation, it generally just revolves around new cars. And this shows that, used car buyers are coming out in full force. This is still very, very heavy. So this is a great slide. There's a lot of information here.
Absolutely.
The demand for pickups, performance vehicles, and midsize pickups has increased. Now, that might be kind of shocking because these vehicles are, sometimes on the higher price point, but automakers turning on that 0%, those 0% offers in response to COVID, it actually spurred an increase in these vehicles. So, the incentives was really just a winning strategy altogether to shore up demand. But these incentives really did their work. Also, it's probably worth noting that, if you're on this call, you're probably familiar somewhat with, at least with the automotive landscape. So the full-size and mid-size pickups may not surprise you that much, but the performance vehicles also going up, and they haven't had the same sort of incentives. That's also, but we think that that's of course income driven. Some of the people in the higher income brackets aren't as concerned about the impacts of COVID to their longevity, their long-term potential income. And there's deals out there, and so we're seeing those being snatched up also. We talk about demand for electric vehicles and compact vehicles. Now, those have seen very steep declines. Now, it makes sense if you take a look at, the electrics are down 43%. If you recall that the slide that we just showed you previously, California had the increase in people who had said, I'm not in the market right now, was very high in California. It was also very high in New York. It was also very high in parts of the Eastern Seaboard. And that's the majority of electric vehicles are purchased. I think so when you talk about just as a whole, it kind of makes sense. Shoppers in California are coming out of the market, shoppers in New York are coming out of the market, and those are the lion's share of where those vehicles are. We talk about compact cars, that's often the entry point into new car ownership. Compact cars generally have the lowest point of purchase or lowest price of purchase across all the segments. We also know that people who are very, concerned about, maybe an impact to their income are touched by this. And then minivan, that's also economic. What do you think? What do you think the reason for minivan?
Yeah, let me chime in as the mother here on this call. A lot of us parents are at home right now with our kids, and so whereas a minivan was a very economical purchase before COVID, where you needed to carry your family around, right now, at least when COVID first struck, there wasn't really anywhere for you to go. So minivan, I'm not surprised that it declined. It wasn't necessarily top on your mind in terms of the type of vehicle you would be buying. These are huge swings, though. It's just really interesting to see the shift in mindset from a segment standpoint. Huge swings. All right, so let's continue on and let's talk about the brands. And this one's not surprising. To me at least, when you talk about all the incentives that were out there, mainly by the domestic brands. And so when we look at the share, the brand share, and how that changed during that pre-COVID period and then post, you can see that most of the domestic brands were the ones that saw an increase in terms of brand share. So not surprising. Matt, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, like, you see the numbers of change in share are modest, but when you see like the percentages of their up, like Ram, for example, has like a 38% increase. Like that's huge. GMC is up 17%. Ford is up 5%. So definitely the 0% is helping, but this, like, I mean, I don't know if there is a silver lining to this environment that we are, but we will say that there's been, an uptick for the domestic makers that are heavy in trucks. So, and it's even carried over to used. I mean, even look at this. It's like the people who've had the biggest increase have also been domestic, and these groups are known for trucks as well. So definitely a shift in the market. Definitely a shift in the market.
It'd be interesting to look at this, and I don't think I've looked at this data, but also to see maybe the regional impact, right? Because when you look at the coast, a lot of times they're, heavy import versus domestic. The middle of the country, many of those states weren't impacted as much because of COVID. And I would assume that there is a huge domestic penetration in the middle of the country as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes great sense. When you go up the center of the country, they did show the moderate, mild decrease and slight increase. Mm-hmm. And we do also know that is truck country.
Absolutely. All right. So let's jump into the next one. Let's talk about price points.
If you look at this slide, average price point increase for new cars is up $800 and used is $850. And I think the first inclination, if you look at it, is to be like, people are spending more. And we certainly have to acknowledge that there are some people who are spending more, but probably the reason for this is because those incentives that are driving people to make purchases, incentives don't tend to be on the least expensive vehicle, or the biggest incentives aren't going to be on the cheapest model in your line. They tend to be greater as incentives move up. So it could be a case of the incentives actually driving people to vehicles they wouldn't normally buy at higher price points. But whatever the magic is behind it, consideration is high, $800 higher now than it was on new cars and $850 higher on used. The used is very different because we're seeing that, the used market is certainly be impacted, but when you consider that there's fewer people buying cars, which inherently means there's going to be fewer people trading in cars. And when you consider that a lot of the auctions across the country were actually shut down, scarcity, there was actually fewer of the more high desirable vehicles out there, and that might have contributed in part to the increase. I would love to say that everybody's now just opting for leather and moonroofs and all that stuff. This is probably just not the case. It's probably just, supply and scarcity driving those prices up.
So let's talk about the dealership experience and how fast it took for a dealership to close a sale. And so, as you know, on TrueCar, in addition to consumers prospecting and shopping, we're able to match that lead to an actual sale from one of our 15,000 plus TrueCar dealers. So what was promising is in the pre-COVID period, the average days to close from lead to sale was about 10 days. And even when we look in the post-COVID period, it's about 10.3. Not much of a difference. I find that to be quite impressive because there was a lot of hurdles in terms of selling cars in this post-COVID period, in terms of remote retailing, having to deliver cars to people's homes, having to negotiate and discuss paperwork over the phone. And so for us to be maintaining the same days to close pre and post, I think is promising. I think dealers adapted pretty quickly to this remote retailing process. And it shows me that we still have efficiency in the process like we did before.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
All right, let's move on to the next one.
I love this slide.
So what is it? Tell us what it is first.
I really love this slide, okay? Because there's so many opportunities to talk about like negativity about COVID. And I'm not minimizing or dismissing any of the valid points behind this. But if you look at this slide, this is saying that 72% of people's value and their desire to have a vehicle, 72% of people who were surveyed who intend to buy a car within 12 months, their needs haven't changed. And in fact, 14% have said that their needs increased for a car.
Matt, let's break that down, Matt, because you said 72%. I don't see 72,
Oh,
but
you're
just
right.
to be
I'm
clear,
sorry.
you're taking the 58% that said they're right.
Yeah. Yes. The people who said COVID hasn't affected me, 58% of people said my need is the same.
Yep.
14% people said my needs have actually increased. And it makes perfect sense that there was a decrease when you consider unemployment and uncertainty in the job market. Totally understand. 28% it did decrease, but 72% said it didn't change, and 14% of that 72 said I want a car more than I did before. It's just it's a very exciting stat for me. Now, 8% of shoppers have said that their primary reason for that increase is because they want to avoid public transportation. I mean, it totally makes sense. Who wants to get into a crowded subway right now? Or who wants to climb into like maybe a ride share where we don't know how the person has maintained it? And actually that changes based on income levels. The people who are on the lower part of the economic scale, their need feels more increased. Like they 10% of these people said, yeah, I'm doing it because I want to tap out of public transportation. But consumers, so anyway, the point is the future looks bright. People still want cars.
Yeah, and I think mindset is so important because I think it's easy when you're in sales to kind of be discouraged, right? And think that, especially when COVID first struck, like, oh gosh, we're doomed. People aren't going to want to buy cars. But I think this says a lot in terms of the mindset. And I think what's important is how do we get these people over the hurdle? And we're going to talk about what that hurdle is, but to feel comfortable to leave their homes and go out and shop for a car. So let's talk about what were they hesitant about? And so we asked consumers, what factors deter you from purchasing a vehicle? And I gotta make sure you understand the research here, because we surveyed these people right after COVID kind of hit the streets, right? Around March 15th or 16th was the first time we surveyed them. Then we surveyed them again in April. The data you're seeing here is actually our May wave. This is May data. This is current data and current mindset. And what was amazing is that 43% of the shoppers that were intending to purchase in the next 12 months said they still have some concerns about catching COVID. And that's what's deterring them from purchasing a vehicle. We also heard concerns over income, right? We're seeing a lot of different companies lay off or furlough. And so even if you have a job, you still might be hesitant to make a big purchase at this time of uncertainty. And then 31% said just physically going to the dealership, which is what was deterring them. So there's some huge opportunities here, and we'll talk about that in a second. But in terms of making consumers feel safe, right? That your sanitization procedures are in order, that you can deliver the car to their home and they don't have to necessarily go into the dealership, or there's a special section in the dealership that allows them to still maintain social distancing. And I think this is still, even though the country is starting to open up, there still is some hesitation in a lot of consumers about their safety and security.
Yeah, and before we go from the slide, I just want to mention, this isn't regional. Based on what you see, like some states have people on the beach, some states don't have people on the beach. So you might say, well, it's an average. Well, it's not actually. When we looked at different regions, you looked at the Midwest, the North, the South, and the West. It was pretty constant when it came down to the hesitation of buying a car because of not wanting to visit the dealership or catching or spreading COVID. But what did change by region was concerns over diminished income. The Midwest actually scored higher as a concern, and the South came in as least concerned. But when we talk about this slide, when I first saw this piece of data, I was floored. I would have thought myself that more people were concerned about, a touch to their income than perhaps, catching or spreading COVID. So catching or spreading COVID and having to visit the dealership really play into what we're going to talk about on the next few slides.
All right, so let's jump into the next slide here. All right, so the factors that drive vehicle shopping and purchase. So Matt, do you want to cover these?
Yeah, we got to know it. I mean, in this crazy world, we're seeing incentives that are unlike, what I've seen in my time in the industry. And these are real service, like we said earlier, they are really powerful drivers of getting people into the market. And it's twofold. It's people who are like sniffing out a deal, who might have already been in the market and they feel safe. But then there's also another group of people. If we look at the bottom line, let's say 30% of people who are like driven in is because of reduced monthly payments, and that ties into the instability. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how those incentives moved people, but these incentives really are the driving force behind getting people behind the wheels of these new cars. The discounts, the interest rates, and that all ties in again to 85% of us are payment buyers. If you can find a way to create a lower payment, and 30% people said, hey, I just need a lower payment. So this is what's driving people right now.
Well, we saw earlier that people are upgrading in some cases to more expensive vehicles because in essence, they can maintain the same payment and get more car for the money.
Yeah.
So
wait, you know what? Actually, there was something else I wanted to
throw it in
before I forgot. It's like if we consider, how these incentives are really impacting people. I mean, how many people on the call can say that they've seen 0% for 84 months before? Probably none. And how many people on the call can say that, they've had an opportunity for somebody to buy a brand new car and have no payments for 6 months? So this is like, it's really important to understand that what these drivers are so that we can take this as a lesson going forward, where we can think of our marketing, when we think of like our marketing spend and what messages really resonate with shoppers. Incentives apparently really resonate with shoppers. And I think the one that we saw was having a huge uptick was, we were talking about Jeremy Allen earlier. Remember, Carrie?
Yeah.
Remember our first guest? And our first guest said that, some of the people who were coming into his store, of course, this is anecdotal, but some of the people who were coming into his store were buying cars strictly so that they could get a breather for 4 months for a car payment because they just didn't know what was going to be going on in the future. So although they were not in the market for it, his brand happened to have 4 months of no payments, they'd come in, buy a car and just say, okay, good. I got a lower payment. I don't have to make one for 4 months. I'm feeling really good about myself right now, and I'll handle things as they come about. So incentives, we can't talk enough about them.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Okay, all right. So let's move on to the next one. Factors that encourage you to interact with the dealership. So, this one's not surprising either. Over the last 3 or 4 shows, we've been talking about how dealers have had to change their sales process and due to COVID and remote retailing being a big part of that. And as you can see, the number one thing people mention as a fact that drew them in was being able to configure the deal online, right? Yeah. Being able to test drive the vehicle at home, being able to complete the entire purchase online, kind of related to the deal. What about communication? That customized communication, being able to talk to your salesperson via video conferencing or just over, video test drives as well, right? Video demos that we're seeing salespeople use. And then the last thing is vehicle home delivery. And I know at TrueCar, we've seen this definitely, when COVID first happened, we launched what we call buy from home, where we could badge dealers that were willing to do online paperwork, deliver the vehicle to the consumer's home, sanitization, all these things that related. And, I think we had 4,000 or 5,000 dealers that were willing to do this. And so not surprising, this is what's resonating with consumers and is a must going forward, even beyond kind of the thick of COVID.
Yeah, because if you remember a couple slides back, we said 43% of people indicated their fear of catching or spreading COVID was giving them hesitancy to buy a car. And then another 31% said they just don't want to physically go to a dealership. Well, take a look at what's increased. At-home test drives. Sounds safer than going into a dealership. Meeting your salesperson and discussing, your deal details via video conferencing. Huge jump. At-home delivery, jump. So all of these things, they're not just like, they don't live on their own. They are ways that a dealership can use tactically to overcome what we've just described. People have said are deterring them from actually, coming to visit you. So, Carrie, would you just go back to a previous seminar where we were talking about people's value propositions, some that were hard to find and easy to find, and how people just weren't really doing a great job of showing their value of at-home deliveries?
Well, yeah, I think, when we've done previous research where we asked consumers what drove them to shop for at a dealership, and then was that information easy or hard to find when it came to advertising of a dealership? And so a lot of what drove consumers to shop for a dealership kind of related to transparency of the deal, right? So, getting upfront pricing, getting trade values, learning more details about the dealership. But what's interesting is those were also where consumers knocked dealers in terms of saying it was hard to find that kind of information. In other words, dealers weren't necessarily doing as good of a job, or it was an opportunity to market and share that information. And Matt, I know where you're going with this. The same thing comes when it comes to remote retailing and monetization. We saw dealers that were offering amazing services during this COVID period. But when it came to me going to your website and finding that information, Matt, I'll let you speak on that. It wasn't always available or marketed as much as it could have been.
Right. And what you would see is that you'd see some people who stood out, who there was one dealership that we talked to, and on their landing page, if I were to visit their website, it was mentioned no less than 3 times on their website that we will deliver a car to you. You don't need to come to us. And then you go look at a different dealer's website and that they offer it, but it's not broadcasted. So how is the consumer, if the consumer sees both options, one dealership saying, yeah, I will bring you the car, the other dealership, you have to fight for it, who's the consumer going to choose, even if they're both offering the same service? So addressing this is just an opportunity. It's just it's low-hanging fruit. Make sure that your consumers know that you can address their concerns and their pain points around keeping them safe in this time frame.
What's really interesting too about this particular chart is, remember, we did 3 different waves of this research. And the first wave we did was in mid-March. It's at least when it got on my radar, COVID, right? That's when people started working from home. It just kind of got on your radar. And you can see that these remote retailing offerings only increased in demand from a consumer standpoint when we surveyed these consumers again in early May. So it'll be interesting, Matt, and I'm just going to throw this out here, Matt. I don't think we've even talked about this, but I think we're going to have to do this again, this wave of research again, and bring this back again in June. And then we're going to do it again in July, right? To see, will consumers still be demanding these remote retailing offerings, even when all of us are at the beach and everything's opened up again, right?
Well, if I have to make a bet, if I were a betting person, I would say that these things are probably going to increase. It's kind of one of those shopping behaviors that, once a person becomes anchored to it, they may be less likely to go back to what they did prior, right? I don't know how many people are going to give up Amazon as soon as they can go into Target. You know what I mean? It's like some of these things might just stick around. So I'd bet $1 that we're going to see these far right lines actually increase even further if we do this again in June.
Hey, Brad Smith just put gold on our comments here. I love this. He says, it's not going to be when can you come in? It's going to be how do you feel comfortable coming in? Right. Gold, right? Mm-hmm. Not when can you come in? It's how do you feel comfortable working with us? Do you want us to bring the car to you? Do you want to come in and have kind of a separate, VIP area? But I think that is such gold.
Totally agree. Thank you for that, Brad. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, we have gone through this whole infographic and pretty amazing. Really excited and proud of the TrueCar team and everybody who has helped put this together. In fact, I want to give a shout out to Nick Woolard and to Richard Park and to Wendy McMullen, all of our analysts and researchers who really pulled this together. And I think we're going to be coming back with more of this because I would love to see where this goes in June and July. I want to give a shout out to Melissa Skinner, who said, this is such great information. Thank you. Lots of value here. And we agree, right, Matt?
Absolutely. Anything that's going to help, I was in the dealer for a whole long time. And for the people who are on the call who are dealers, you understand this. It's sometimes hard to see what's going on outside of what's directly in front of you. But if you have a bigger, a wider view, that could help influence some of the decisions that you make around your marketing, about your hiring, about just your general processes. So information like this, I think, is very valuable. That's why we're very eager to give it to you. for
Yeah,
free.
and I think it's so important because one of the things that we really value, and whenever you see me speak at a conference to the industry, is that I can always give my opinion. Matt can give his opinion, and by the way, I feel like we'd be right. I don't know, half the time, right, Matt?
Yeah, right. We know what we're talking about mostly, right?
We know we're right. Anybody can be an expert, but the reality is I'm very data oriented because I think data doesn't lie. And so when you look at consumer shopping behavior, we have 8 million shoppers that are visiting our website on a monthly basis, and you can see how they shift in terms of their consumer behavior. Or when you look at thousands of people who were researched, it definitely tells you not just what's happening at your store or with your set of dealers if you're a consultant or vendor. It really tells you what's happening across the entire company and where things are going. And so we'll be bringing more of this back to you every single month. I want to encourage all of you to go to TrueCar.com/dealer-blog. Once again, TrueCar.com/dealer-blog. We have a COVID section on the dealer blog, and this is going to be the very first thing you see, this infographic. You can download it, save it, share it with your stores, and we'll also be sharing this recording for those who are want to watch this on replay or share it with everybody in their stores, their companies. We would love for this to be shared across the entire industry. Matt, any final words?
Yes, before anything, I want to shout out, like, if you like this kind of information, you like this kind of training, tomorrow, TrueCar's own Ruben Fine will be hosting a webinar. We have webinar Wednesdays. And Carrie, it's TrueCar.com/webinars. The topic tomorrow is how to integrate text into your sales process for just a better overall exposure. Webinars for TC dealers, just click that link, sign in. We are really adamant that we give the dealership body as much information as we can to help them through these trying times. And when these trying times are done, we're still going to be adamant about giving the dealer body as much information as they can so that we can all just move our game up a little bit, get a little bit closer to serving the customers ultimately. What was your favorite stat? Did you have a favorite stat out of all of these?
Oh gosh, you're putting me on the spot here. I mean, I gotta say, well, I mean, to answer your question, well, actually, hold on. Before we jump into that, the webinar this week actually is on payments, Matt. We're launching payments this week. It's on payment. Yeah. So no, I gotta correct you because we're so excited about payments this week. And that is going to be the webinar. If you want to learn how you can offer upfront payments in the TrueCar process, in addition to a upfront price, payment, and trade, make sure you're on that webinar tomorrow.
Ruben, I'm so glad that Carrie caught that. I apologize, Ruben. My apologies to you, but I'm sorry. All right.
It's fine. Okay, so you asked me, what was my favorite stat?
Yes.
I just have to say, looking at how we're rebounding, right? From pre-COVID to now, the fact that shopping is at the level pre-COVID and actually we're exceeding the level, to me, is the most exciting thing. I feel like I've been looking at that chart almost every single day, waiting for that bell curve to come right back up.
Yeah. I think that's great. Mine, it complements yours. It's something that you touched on, was how the days to close didn't really change much. And if you really, just like you touched on, if you really dig into like how deep the transaction has changed, to see it not slow down, I mean, like not dramatically slow down, that's a huge win. And it really just goes to show the flexibility, the adaptability and ingenuity of dealerships that are like, hey, I'm going to figure out how to make this happen for my consumer in this environment. So behind seeing that, the interest is up, seeing how dealerships have adapted so quickly to this, that's probably what brings me the most joy.
Well, and I hope it sticks, I think it will. I think that the consumer is going to demand some of these remote retailing processes. There's going to still be a segment of consumers that are going to want to do things how they were always done. But there's going to be, as we saw, a third of consumers in our survey, at least, that are looking to do things more online, to have conveniences like the car being brought to their home, to be able to speak to their salesperson on video conferencing. I think, those are good changes for our industry. I think they bring efficiency to the process.
Yes. I mean, what NADA says the average car deal is 4.5 hours. Maybe it won't be 4.5 hours anymore.
I think so. No, you're right.
Yeah, when you're doing so much remotely, like the process can be a lot easier for the consumer and the dealer. So that's why I'm so excited about that. So gosh, it's
Well,
been
I just want to encourage you. This is, I mean, how long has gone by? We've gone 30 minutes or so, right? I mean, it's been an amazing show, Matt. And I think, like I said, we'll be back with more of these insights and talking about where is this going in June and July. If you're a TrueCar dealer, encourage you to go to truecar.com/dealer to see our blog, to get more information. If you're not a TrueCar dealer, we'd love for you to also gather some more information. And we're really excited to bring this to you. Matt, any final words from you?
Thank you for tuning in. Sincerely, thank you for taking the time to tune in. Please share this. If you found it valuable, share it with your friends who are in automotive. The more people that see this, the more people that we can help. And I would like to see you again next week if possible. So that's my final words. What about you?
Well, let's give them the information. Every Tuesday, we'll be here at 11 a.m. Pacific. Please share this with all of your friends, your colleagues, your coworkers. We want to continue to build upon this. We thank you so much for your time. We'll see you next week.